Welcome back. We're working on authserver.net. What we're doing now is we're going to implement the next flow in the OAuth 2.0 protocol. This one is going to be the implicit flow. So if we look at this, we've implemented these access tokens, refresh tokens. We've taken into account HTTP redirections, as well as client registrations, types, identifiers, authentication types, the protocol endpoints, including authorization and token endpoints. Which you can see here, we have the authorized endpoint and then the token endpoint. I've added in some other controllers here, but they are just completely empty, just as a reminder that we need to go in later and make some modifications to them. And last time we did this authorization code, where the client, the resource owner who is the user, they go on their web application, it redirects over to the authorization server where they authenticate, we get back an authorization code, it kicks back over to the client, so this would be the server side of the web application, which would then exchange that authorization code for an access token with an optional refresh token. Optional. So let me make a note here, which says authorization code has optional refresh token. And we still need to take into account the refresh token endpoint for getting new token. Okay? And this here describes the flow itself, the request, the response, and the errors that we can get. And then the access token response here, and here's implicit grant. So the implicit grant flow is used to obtain access tokens. It does not support the issuance of refresh tokens and is optimized for public clients don't operate a particular redirect URL. These clients are typically implemented in a browser using scripting language such as JavaScript. Since this is a redirection-based flow, the client must be capable of interacting with the resource owner's user agent, which is like a web browser, and receiving requests from redirection. Unlike the authorization code grant, in which the client makes separate requests, the client receives the access token as a result of the authorization request. It relies on the presence of the owner and the registration URL because the access token is encoded into the redirection URL. It may be exposed to the resource owner and other applications residing on the same device. That's true. And so with this flow, you can see that the user authenticates. They get the redirection with the access token in a fragment. They get the redirection URI without the fragment. Web-hosted client resource user agent. A and B are broken into two parts as they pass through. Okay, here we go. This is what we want to do. The client initiates the flow by directing the resource owner's user agent to the authorization endpoint. The client includes its client identifier, requested scope, local state, and a redirection URI. Right? Scope and state. This is fine. It's going to make sure that the ID is right, that the credentials are being passed in are correct, the type of token is correct. You're going to get the client, check your course policy, verify that the scopes are in it, verify that we have the redirect URLs. And then here, when we look at the request, the value must be set to token. And this is going to be called authorize implicit flow. And down here we can do this again. And this is going to be a client implicit. And then we're going to redirect it to the authorize implicit flow. And I'm going to pass in here my client and my path and query string. That's interesting. I've never seen that formatting before. Okay. The authorization authenticates the resource owner via the user agent and it establishes whether or grants or denies the client's request. So that's over here in the login controller. We pass in our parameters. Here we're validating the login and then redirecting to the redirect URI. Now this right here, we need to check the type of client. If it is authorization code, then we call generate authorization code async. If it is implicit, then we call generate implicit. If I look at this service, we should have a generate token here. This is what's generating the refresh token. So we're just going to call this. And instead of passing this in, I'm just going to pass in a client here. And so here, we want to include a bool called issue refresh tokens. So if my client is issuing refresh tokens, then we do it there. And my client.get type does not equal a type of client implicit. Implicit flow clients cannot have refresh tokens. So back over here in the login controller, I want to get my client. So we're going to inject up here my private read-only data access layer, data access layer. And we want to do a get client asynchronous of my client ID. Now I want to switch on my client. And so if it is a case client authorization code, then I want to do one thing. And if it's a case client implicit, then I want to do another. Like that. And otherwise here, we're just going to do a var token equals await JWT service dot generate token asynchronous. And I'm going to pass in my client my scope, my application user.id, and my IP address. And we want to do a split this by the space. And now what I want to do is I just want to redirect this to the parse query string for the redirect URL. Okay, so the resource owner grants access, the resource server redirects the user agent back to the client, includes the access token in the URI fragment. And then it retains that fragment information locally. The web-hosted client resource returns a web page capable of accessing the full redirection URL, including the fragment retained by the user agent and extracting the access token contained in the fragment. The user agent executes the script provided by the web-hosted client resource locally, which extracts the access token, and then it passes the access token to the client. So what I'm going to look at here real quick is another application I have, and I'm going to open up Fiddler, and then also the dev tools. When I log in, the redirect URI looks like this. Stupid. And then it's received the full token. I need to make sure that the fragment that I'm passing in is correct. So let me open this up one more time. Give it a second to load. Okay, everything's loaded now. I can close this, and we're just going to look at Fiddler just for a second here. Here it is. Okay, well, I found the header. Which includes the token. And the other token information in it. And that got sent to the callback URI, which is actually wrong. And then that redirected it back to the external login, callback, redirect URI. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I want to look up here ASP.NET Core 3.1 attach JWT token. Because I want this to be in two separate to the context or whatever. This isn't what I want. Yeah, this is all right. HTTP post login validates the credentials, generates the tokens. But I don't see where. I don't see where. Yeah, I know that this is right. I know that this is right. That's right. Oh, that's not what I want. It's like I want an interceptor. That's exactly what I want. We're going to continue forward in just a second. That didn't help at all. So what I'm going to do instead is we're going to do this redirection URL back, and we're just going to generate the token. And what I want to do here is I want to say my access token is going to be equal to and it's token.access token. And then we want to say and my expires n equals token.expires n. And then I also want to say my token type equals token.token type. Okay, this time when I check back over here, it's like because I want to attach this to the context. So it's like you want to have a piece of middleware which is listening for JWTs. Okay, hold on. Okay, when I look at this one first in Fiddler, we've received a ID token, not an access token. Token type expires n. Oh, you're also including your scope. Your state. and my scope equals and my state equals okay, that's right. And now if I look at my middleware in this example project, what it's doing is looking for the authorization header coming in on the request. And if it's not there, then it's going to validate the token and attach the account. So I want to say ASP.NET Core 3.1 third party token authenticate and attach to context or something like that. It's using the sign-in manager. Okay. So now that this is done, this is going to redirect me, right? And we're passing in response type, client ID, resource, scope, and state. And these are what we're returning. That looks right. Okay. Down here, I'm going to return a bad request. So on my client, I'm going to change this to be a authorization code controller. And we're going to change this to be called authorization code controller, or just authorization code. And we want this to redirect to my authorization endpoint. And then the redirect is going to go to authorization code login. Okay, down here we're going to go to the token endpoint, and my redirect URL is going to go to the authorization code login. And then in my client, my redirect URL is going to be authorization code. Now, I want to create another client here for my create client asynchronous of a new client implicit. And this one we want to say my project ID equals initial project.id. My client ID, we're going to say that this is my auth code client ID. And then we want to say implicit client ID. We don't issue refresh tokens. Like that. And this is going to be called auth code client, and this one's going to be called implicit. And that's going to be clients.firstx, where my client ID is equal to globals.implicit client ID. Like that. Okay, we need a course origin for the auth code, and then for the implicit. And then the scope, we're changing this to be ID. So we need to do this one again here for the implicit. And then this is the last one, which is my redirection. And this one needs to go to implicit login. And this one's going to be authorization code login. And this one's going to be implicit login. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to remove the migrations here. And I'm going to do a add migration called init in my output directory of data migrations. And in SQL, this needs to just be the client. Okay, I need to move these. I can't show these ones here. I'm going to call this test implicit client. Okay. That's good. So now in here, we're going to go to my dev server. And I'm going to scrap the database. Let it reseed. So it's upset at me because I never made the migration. Let it finish seeding. parameter S. That is totally not helpful. Line 75 of seed data. So here, it didn't like that. Is it client secret is nothing? So if a client secret isn't specified, can I just set it to be string.empty? Over here, let's delete the database one more time. Run it again. Okay, we create the project. We create the clients. We create the auth code, cores and implicit cores, the scopes, the redirects. We're good. So now I can run the client. And I want to put it at authorization code. At the index. Okay, we're going to put a get on this like that. Try it again. Let's run this client. There we go. It redirects me to the authorization endpoint. Now, this redirected me login home. But now I have its own login controller. We'll try it again. Good. Now I can do admin and password 1. Here's my token endpoint, and we generate the token. And there it is. And if I look over in the JWT decode, there it is with our ID, our test client, and our issuer, and our audience. Finally, if I was to open up Postman and start the web API, you can see 401 unauthorized. The same thing here. And now if I update the token with the new token, you can see we're authed and good to go. So let's get our implicit flow going. So we're going to change this to be an implicit controller. And what I want to do here is I want to redirect it to my implicit client ID with a state, a redirect URI of implicit, response type of. If I look back at the protocol, token. We do want it to hit the authorized endpoint as opposed to the token endpoint, correct? Authorization endpoint. And so then when we log in here, we're going to get the access token, the state, the expires in, the string for the token type. What were the other ones? Scope and the state. And now we're going to do a login with sign in manager if we wanted to. And then here we're going to return the access token. We can get rid of the privacy one here and the error one. And then I can copy this to be implicit. We can run it. Run the back end. And now we're going to do this for implicit index, which redirects me Whoa, what just happened there? Okay, so it's failing the redirect URI. So in my seed data, here, implicit client. Okay, we'll run it again. Over here on my authorized controller, I do want to see this one. Let this finish. Start the front end. Navigate to implicit index. We check the redirect URLs. It looks good. We redirect to the login. We log in. Key length is 0. Okay, when we look at the token, my key length is 0. Okay, I need to change this. So in my iGlobals implicit client ID, client server URI, like there. We need to have another key, which is called a we're going to call it the symmetric security key, like that. And then this is going to be globals. Oh, wait. But how do you generate the signing credential if the client secret is nothing? Because over here, we want to know this client secret. So we want to look up issue JWT token without client secret. Well, I think it still has a client secret. If I look at that again, I'm going to call it a string implicit signing symmetric security key. So we're going to add that here. And then where I'm creating that, this is not used in the request, but is needed to validate the signing credential of the token. So let's try it again. Boom, perfect. Okay. And this one wants to be client secret decoded. Okay, and here we want to implement that. This is a fake implicit symmetric security key of proper length. We'll run it again. Let it seed. Now we'll run the client. We want to go to implicit index, which is good. We pass in the credentials. We generate our token. And we redirect it, and we have the access token, the expired in, the token type, the scope, and the state. And now, in the similar way that we tested the API, I can run this again. And we'll open up Postman. Okay, and now we're going to try to hit this again. It should say unauthorized, and then we can change this to be the proper bearer token, and you can see it's authorized. Hey there, BFY Lin. So that's like Brian, it's kind of. Big Fly Brian. Which keyboard am I using? This is a Bloody keyboard. That's the name of it. It's a light strike keyboard, so instead of having switches, it uses UV lights. So I think that on that note, implicit is complete. So let's go down here, and we're going to add in it doesn't look like it's updated yet. There we go. We're going to say added implicit grant flow. And we'll stage that out. So based on our docs here, we're now on to the resource owner password credentials. And the one following this is access token credentials. So these are both pretty straightforward. But as for me, I got to go take a break. I got to go run over and pick up my car from the shop. I'll be back in just a couple of hours. So let's say we'll be back at, it's 12 o'clock now, so we'll be back around 3 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. Thanks for staying with me. If you have any questions, make sure you pop them into our Discord, discord.pixelhorrorstudios.com. And then I put all these videos up at youtube.pixelhorrorstudios.com. Thanks again, guys. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.